Welcome to today's Global Connections program. I'm Bill Miller. What is the U.S. Fund for UNICEF? What is UNICEF, the United Nations Children's Fund? And what are these two organizations doing to help literally millions of children around the world? Today we're going to take a look at two very interesting organizations. My guest today is Mr. Barron Segar. Mr. Barron Segar is the Chief Development Officer and the Executive Vice President for the U.S. Fund for UNICEF. Before joining UNICEF USA, Mr. Segar served as the Director of Development for the State of Georgia Public Broadcasting Television, USA. Mr. Barron Segar, welcome to today's Global Connections program.
Bill, thanks for having me.
I appreciate you being with me. Let's jump right into it, Barron.
Sure.
We're going to get into your organization, but what is UNICEF, the UN Children's Fund? This is probably one of the best known, if not the best known UN agencies. When was it formed? Why was it formed?
So UNICEF was formed after World War II. Help the starving children in China. And it's amazing to think that UNICEF now works in 190 different countries and territories, working around issues like clean water, sanitation, hunger, and child protection. A lot of issues facing children today. And UNICEF is really unique in my opinion because we're invited in by governments to work. So we don't just go into a country and set up shop and say we're here to help. We have a seat at the table. We're actually working with governments, working with leaders, and working with communities to make sure that children survive and thrive in these 190 different countries and territories.
Mm-hmm. Now, UNICEF is just celebrating its 70th anniversary as an organization, and we don't have 3 weeks to go through all of them, but what are some of the greatest accomplishments of UNICEF? We're going to talk about one of them, Polioplus, in just a few minutes.
Absolutely.
But what are some of the others that UNICEF's accomplished over these 70 years?
Well, the biggest one that comes to my mind is one of the main ways we're measured, which is child mortality. Mm-hmm. So today there are fewer children that are dying than almost at any other time in history. So in 1990, 35,000 children under the age of 5 died every single day of preventable diseases. It's an incredible number. Today we've cut that number in half to 16,000. So today, 16,000 children under the age of 5 will die of a preventable disease. That's still, by the way, a tragic number, but there's progress nonetheless. And our goal is to keep going until that number reaches 0.
Mm-hmm. And that's a tremendous accomplishment. It really is. It's still, as you say, the number's too high, but at least it's coming down and not going up. Now, our viewers can go to www.unicef.org to get more information about that organization. Let's talk about the U.S. Fund for UNICEF. What do you do? How do you support UNICEF?
So we're in the United States. We're the fundraising, the advocacy arm of UNICEF. So, for example, in the United States this year, we hope to raise $600 million in private support through companies, through foundations, through individuals, and through products like UNICEF Kid Power, which are there to help save and protect the world's children. I mean, UNICEF can't do the work without private philanthropy. So my job and our team's job and our senior management team's job is to make sure that the resources are available to the kids that need them the most. And then I would also just say that we also have a role in advocacy. So we want to make sure that our donors, that our partners, that our volunteers are loud and proud about the work that UNICEF is doing and making sure that children come first.
Mm-hmm. And our viewers can help this cause. They can donate, go to UNICEF,
viewers
USA.org.
Viewers can always help UNICEF, so that's correct. UNICEFusa.org if you're in the United States. Otherwise, go to unicef.org and you'll easily be directed to the country of origin.
Okay. Now, you're in the United States. You're U.S. based.
That's correct.
Are there other funds for UNICEF, like the UK fund for UNICEF, the Bolivian fund for UNICEF? How does that work?
There are. So, for example, there's the UK fund, there's the Japan fund, there's the Hong Kong fund, and I have the great honor of serving on the UNICEF Global Think Tank. And while it sounds like a really cool title, really what we're doing is we're trying to set fundraising strategy for 34 different countries. So we're trying to think, how can we take them and grow a major gifts program, which is individuals that are giving at higher levels, or do some work on the corporate side. But yes, in the U.S., it's fundraising and advocacy. But I would also say that we're in a very unique position in the U.S. because we have 9 regional offices. And that's important for us because we have 9 regional boards. So we have about 20 people on each board, from Dallas to Los Angeles. And they're creating a movement and financial resources available for kids.
You mentioned a minute ago Kid Power for UNICEF.
Yes.
Before we get off of that, what exactly is that?
So actually I'm wearing my band, which is it's the first wearable for good. So this year, Bill, we will have 177,000 kids signed up for Kid Power this spring. And they're basically going to be exercising. So 1 in 4 children in the U.S. Are not fit. 1 in 4 children in less developed countries are malnourished. So you've got obesity issues here in the U.S., and you've got hunger issues in less developed countries. So kids get active, they dance and they play sports, or they just walk and they earn points. And every time you walk a certain distance, you unlock a Kid Power point. Your Kid Power band goes off, and through the generosity of Lucasfilms, Star Wars, Target, and other donors throughout the United States, points basically unlock what we call plumping up. So in my little hand I have, actually, Bill, it's what a lot of people have always talked about. This is the #1 product that keeps kids alive. It's a fortified peanut butter paste. So it basically, you tear it open, and when kids are really malnourished, they can't chew. So the child sucks on this, and it basically brings a kid back to life. So we're unlocking points, and we've unlocked over 500,000 RUTF, or fortified nutritional supplements, for kids through Kid Power this year alone.
That's remarkable. That is.
You can't eat this. I'm not going to give this.
No,
to you.
no. We'll save it for somebody who may need a little more than we do. But that's really important. And of course, you were talking about the Kid Power too. Not only can the kids get healthier, which will help them, their healthy situation psychologically and physically, but also they can help raise money for UNICEF. And
we actually see Kid Power as the movement in the United States. The majority of schools that are participating are Title I schools. A Title I school is a school that has subsidies for food, for lunch. So we're very proud and very honored to work with our corporate partners and individuals that are making Kid Power possible. By the way, the goal at the end of 5 years is to have over 1 million kids each year enrolled in Kid Power.
That's great. That's fantastic.
I expect to see one on your band next time we talk.
We will do that. You can take it to the bank. Okay, great. Well, let's talk about UNICEF and some of the programs it has. One of the most spectacular programs it has is with Rotary International, with the UN World Health Organization, with the U.S. Centers for Disease Control. Now, there are many other organizations that have gotten on board over the years, but the Polioplus Program is absolutely the largest international health program ever undertaken. Talk a little bit about the Polioplus Program and why it's important and what is it succeeding to do.
So you asked, earlier what we're proud about, and we're so proud to partner with Rotary and the World Health Organization around polio. In 1988, 350,000 kids were born with polio. And we haven't gotten the results from 2016, but we believe that number is around 30. So we've gone, again, from 350,000 children born with polio in 1988 to almost 30, maybe even less than 30 in 2016. That is an extraordinary accomplishment. And I also want to make sure that your viewers know that we're doing great things for kids around the world. That the kids are, yes, we have more children on the run than any other time since World War II. We're working as hard as we can to address that, but we're also seeing huge successes. It is our goal that in the next 3 years that polio will be eradicated from the face of the earth. Rotary, to your point, Rotary has 1.2 million members. They're actually in more countries than UNICEF is. And so their members are on the ground, and they're delivering the polio vaccines in the most vulnerable areas and the most vulnerable communities in the entire world. We couldn't do it without Rotary, and we're very pleased that they fund our efforts. And we're now looking forward to the day where we celebrate the end of polio. It's going to send a very important message to the world that we can actually eliminate a global disease.
It certainly is, and we think back to some of the others that we've dealt with over the years, smallpox and what have you. That was a tremendous accomplishment on the part of the World Health Organization, but this one is just so pervasive, and you have to eliminate the last virus of polio, or it will come back. And as you mentioned, it's in 2 countries, Pakistan and Afghanistan, right now,
correct.
The last 2. But I remember when this program started, as you mentioned, back around '88, and at that time they projected out that each year, literally millions of children would not be afflicted with the scourge of polio. You would have taxpayers, children, over 50,000 children's lives would be saved every year. Something like $300 million per year in the United States, taxpayers would not pay for anti-polio programs, and the taxpayers of the world would save like $1.5 billion a year, which is a huge amount of money, and it could be going into other programs and other projects and that type of thing. But it's a remarkable program. But I so often hear about how it's really a paradigm for the public-private partnership. Here you got Rotary International, 1.2 million members, a private organization. The UN agencies, public organizations. But a lot of other service clubs are using that as sort of a model, are they not?
They really are. We do a lot of work with Kiwanis. We do some work with the Lions Club, and we have a global partnership now with LDS Charities, the Church of Latter-day Saints. We happen to believe that the global service groups, faith-based organizations are really, the synergies are coming together to align with UNICEF's mission of helping the world's children. And so as we look at the next 5 years, I mean, we aspire at the U.S. Fund for UNICEF to raise $1 billion a year. And $1 billion is going to save a lot of children around the world. You mentioned Rotary. When I think of UNICEF, a lot of people think about education, or they think about our work with clean water. I often think about our work, to your point, with immunizations. UNICEF immunizes 40% of the world's children. That is an astounding number. UNICEF immunizes 40% of the world's children. And we couldn't do that on our own. This is why we rely on valuable partners like Rotary to make sure that we're reaching the hardest to reach children to end the polio epidemic.
And that is so absolutely critical. And it's one of those situations where it looked easy at the beginning. I remember back in 1988, it looked like it was going to take 3 or 4 years. It's really been extremely challenging to do it, but we're just on the cusp of doing it. And it's been also remarkable to see the other groups that have gotten involved. Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, you've got various governments that have contributed to it. You've got other individuals who have gotten on board, but it's just a remarkable program and one that we should all be very proud of.
I would agree. And by the way, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the biggest funder around immunizations for the U.S. Fund for UNICEF. We're very proud to have that partnership. I'll also say that, as we talk about Pakistan and Afghanistan, these are also countries that are war-torn, so it makes it really tough for us to get out and immunize the kids. But I would tell you, there are many times where UNICEF goes in and brokers ceasefires, so we can come in with our UNICEF workers and vaccinate kids. So it's really an amazing power that UNICEF has to put children first.
Well, you're watching Global Connections Television, which is a privately funded, independently produced program. The opinions expressed on Global Connections are solely those of the moderator and his guest. We would encourage our viewers to go to our website at www.globalconnectionstelevision.com to view previous programs. Also, if you have an interest in our programs and would like to share them, or if you're involved with a website, or you're involved with an educational institution that has an intra-campus television hookup, or a PBS community access television station, whatever the case might be, please feel free to download the programs and to air them. Global Connections Television is provided free of charge at no cost as an international public service. Today we're taking a look at the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, and also the U.S. Fund for UNICEF to see how it supports UNICEF and some of the great work that it does around the world. And my guest today is an expert on both of these organizations. My guest today is Mr. Barron Segar, and Mr. Barron Segar is the Chief Development Officer and Executive Vice President for the U.S. Fund for UNICEF. Barron, we're talking about, we could talk for hours on Polioplus.
Are we going to talk for hours? That's what I was told.
Well, we'll have to do 2 or 3 shows. But let's move into the field. I know you go overseas quite a bit, and it has to be extremely moving. I know all the Rotarians I've talked with who've been on the national immunization drives where they go over and immunize children, say it's a life-changing experience. How have these overseas trips impacted your life? And I know you get out, and maybe you could share some of the stories of some of your recent visits.
Actually, I'll share 2, since we're talking about immunizations. I had the honor of traveling to Haiti with our friends from Kiwanis, and we followed for the day lady healthcare workers. And these are 70 and 80-year-old females that are carrying a large, vat of vaccines, and they're basically reaching the hardest to reach villages, and they know where to go to talk to women. And we followed them up the side of a mountain one day. I have to tell you, I was exhausted. They kept going, and so just the fact that there are people that are nationals of these countries that want to make sure that these kids thrive and survive. They're reaching the hardest to reach, climbing up the sides of mountains to get young women to take a tetanus vaccine, because another success that we are celebrating, that the tetanus virus, maternal and neonatal tetanus, has gone from being epidemic in 58 countries to 29. And by the way, that's 3 shots to a young woman, and she will not pass tetanus to her newborn. So a lot of successes there. I had the very humbling experience just about 3 months ago to travel to Amman, Jordan. We went into the Zatari refugee camp. We take donors to the field, our major donors, corporate partners. We have a trip in just a little over 3 weeks with the Church of Latter-day Saints, taking them to see our work firsthand. Again, very humbling experience, but we go into the refugee camp and we see how UNICEF, by the way, and all of its partners are working together to save and protect very young lives, whether that is clean water, whether that is education, whether that is child protection, or that's nutrition.
Now, the refugee camp in Jordan, that was primarily children from Syria, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. So at the Zatari refugee camp, there are 80,000 refugees that are in a settlement, men, women, and children. And UNICEF was the lead for clean water, sanitation, and education. So we know that about half of the kids were in school, and that was a very humbling experience. I would also say that when we went into Jordan, we saw where some of the Jordanian kids and the Syrian kids were side by side learning English. And I asked one of the young girls, I said, what's it like being Jordanian and having a Syrian girl, attend school with you? Is it different than having somebody that's from Jordan? And she put her arm around the young girl and she said, she's my sister. I love her. She's no different than me. And that's the message about kids, the vulnerability of children, that every child has a right to survive. Every child has that right to thrive. Every child has a right to education. And at the same time, Bill, as we were in this camp, there were 75,000 people outside of Jordan on the corner of the border of Syria trying to get into Jordan. They weren't allowed in. But UNICEF was able to successfully broker a deal with the government, working with the government, so that UNICEF was the only organization that was allowed to provide clean water and sanitation and food to these poor 75,000 people that just couldn't get in. And also, let's keep in mind that it's winter. It's now winter in Syria. When I went in November, it was in the 60s. Now it's in the 30s. So we also have done a really noble job of getting winter kits to all the kids. But again, UNICEF working in 190 different countries and territories. I told somebody the other day, I said, every time I go to the field, there's something I come back with. I had no idea that we did. For example, when we were in the Zatari refugee camp, UNICEF operated a water filtration system. So we were pumping water in to these 80,000 men, women, and children every single day so they would have access to clean water, monitoring the clean water that each family took in, because you're only allowed a certain amount of water for each family. And it was just, it was a very complex irrigation system, by the way, where water is being going into the household, so everybody had access to clean water.
And this is something we have to keep in mind too, that so often we hear about people whose lives have been dislocated. The children in Syria have lost basically a lifetime as far as schooling goes, their health needs, that type of thing. But so often you have, as you mentioned, you have to negotiate with governments. Sometimes you're negotiating in war zones. You've got 5 or 6 rebel groups you have to negotiate with. You have to deal with them. And then you have to deal with the elements of the weather, which in the middle of the winter is not much fun. Of course, the middle of the summer is not either, but the winter can be even more crippling. But these are things that we just don't focus on in the United States and many areas around the world because of the comforts that we have, but we need to, and we need to learn more about what is going on in these with the programs you're talking about. Well, before we run out of time, you have several really interesting programs, but one that is probably the most popular program is Trick or Treat for UNICEF.
Absolutely.
What exactly is that program?
So Trick or Treat for UNICEF is it's our original Kids Helping Kids program. Every Halloween, which we're already probably starting to work toward this Halloween, we distribute the little orange box. And kids go around and they ask for candy, and then they also ask for their spare change to support UNICEF's work. And then through a lot of our Coinstar vendors, and also people can turn around and take the change and mail us a check. But basically it's Kids Helping Kids. Kids are going around and they are raising money for UNICEF. They're doing lemonade stands, and it's been a very successful program. I can't tell you the number of people that come up to me today as adults and say, I remember when I trick-or-treated for UNICEF, and that's why I'm a donor with you today. So the Kid Power, which is our new global movement, and then Trick-or-Treat for UNICEF, these are really important programs because as kids, it's in many cases the first time a young child learns how to give back. And I like the statistical analogy of saying that when you trick-or-treat for UNICEF, you get more candy. I don't know that I can back up that claim, but I do think that when you ask for money, you get an extra candy bar. So I think there's some other advantages
You're
there.
certainly getting an extra treat, that's for
Absolutely.
sure, no doubt about it. And of course, children, if they want to participate, they don't always have to go trick-or-treating door to door. They could have a competition like 2 classrooms in a school or the whole school, one school against another school, something like that. Rotarians, I know for a fact, the Rotarians put these boxes out in their offices and insurance companies, at various department stores, places like that. They put them out at the Rotary Club meetings every week, pass the box around, usually from the latter part of middle of October through about the middle of November, something even beyond Halloween, trick-or-treat time. So there are many ways you can do that and be involved to really do some good in the world. And it's really not much of an expenditure of energy and certainly no money.
There are lots of ways that your viewers can get involved with UNICEF. Again, going to unicefusa.org. There are hundreds of events taking place around the country every year. And all you have to do is go on UNICEF USA and click on I Want to Help. A great way to help is to become a monthly donor, by the way, to the U.S. Fund for UNICEF, which is also tax deductible. And then there are lots of ways to volunteer. We have youth groups and multiple college campuses. There are whether you're 5 years old or whether you're 85 years old, there's a way for you to participate with UNICEF.
Even older or even younger, whichever the case might be. Right?
Absolutely.
No, that's true. Well, in the last few minutes we have, you have another interesting program. It's called End Trafficking Now. What is that program?
So UNICEF, one of the things that we recognize that trafficking of children is endemic here in the United States and also around the world. So we're starting an end trafficking campaign to raise awareness and visibility and funds around children that are trafficked. My first field visit was to Belize, and I went to these islands which are far from the luxury vacation island of Belize, and I learned, for example, that the number one issue facing Belize is trafficking, with the cruise ships coming in, and so there's an end trafficking campaign in Belize working with the governments to make sure that that kids are kept safe. So what I would say is in many states in the United States, in January, we're doing visibility campaigns around end trafficking to make sure that we're raising visibility and awareness about the plight here in the U.S., Houston, Atlanta, California, cities that are really focused on trafficking, and we're focused on it here in the U.S. and also abroad.
On the last minute we have left, what do you see as the major challenge? I know funding is always a problem.
Absolutely.
But what is the major challenge that UNICEF is confronting and the U.S. Fund for UNICEF as you move forward?
We want to put children first. We want to make sure that in everything that happens in the United States, that the platform of children comes first. Children are the most vulnerable. They need protection. They need access. They need access to clean water, education. That we want people to come more involved. I mean, this is the great thing about your show. For a lot of people watching today, this is their first introduction to UNICEF. We're doing really great things around the world in 190 different countries and territories. We need help. There are lots of ways to getting involved. By the way, whether it's writing a check or donating your time or writing to Congress, there are lots of ways. So we're asking for help. Again, putting children first is the biggest platform we can achieve.
It certainly is. And of course, our viewers can go to www.unicef.org to focus on the UN Children's Fund, but they can also focus on the U.S. Fund for UNICEF at unicefusa.org.
Absolutely.
And there are many ways that they can get involved. And we just scratched the surface today. We did not get into great detail in a lot of the programs that you have.
I hope I'm your most downloaded show, by the way.
Without a doubt. It certainly will be. But anyway, it's fascinating what you're doing. But Barron Segar, I do want to thank you so very much for bringing us up to date on the very interesting programs and projects that you have underway. And I want to thank you so very much for a very interesting and a very informative program.
And thank you to your audience as well, by the way, for being globally minded and caring about what's happening around the world.
Our pleasure. Thank you. I'm Bill Miller. Thank you for joining us today on Global Connections program.